Chapter 21, CH21. We spent the first 2 weeks poring over the files Gray sent to us about the soups they have on record. Using these records and watching the many interviews of the soups, we tried to piece a personality together of them. After another couple of weeks, we found our first target. A small soup who is considered a C-lister, the lowest of the soup level of popularity. The next was a B-lister, then an A-lister, and finally one of the 7 as they were the most popular soups in the world. Our target was a small-time soup in Buffalo, New York. His name is really Bloodhound. Frenchie says with a laugh while triple-checking the gear as we drive to Buffalo. I'm not sure how I feel about that, Marvin Milk, or aka for his code name, says with some annoyance. If it makes you feel better we are going to beat him up to get info, I say shrugging while driving with the window down so I can smoke. Only Frenchie and I smoke regularly, as doesn't and Butcher is more of a drinker. Surprised you ain't gonna try to keep things civil boss man, Butcher says to me with a smirk. If you want we can keep things civil, though I find most people, even soups, respond to violence, I say shrugging my shoulders and ignoring his goading. Fuck that, I'm good with giving him the what for. No such thing as a good soup, Butcher says with a vengeful look in his eyes. The rest of the ride there everyone bonds over reasons to beat up soups. It makes me really think that these men are more insane than I initially thought. Then again I've met crazier bastards during the wars. We finally arrived in Buffalo and got rooms at a cheap motel. The following morning we all got back in the van to discuss the plan one more time. Remember, do not engage him for now. We are here to simply follow him and find out his normal daily schedule. So for the first week, it is nothing but observation. Once we have a grasp on his daily life we can find the perfect time to strike, I say to them while staring down Butcher who just rolls his eyes at my look. I got it. No fighting, just lookin', Butcher says opening the van and we split up in pairs. Butcher and were together, while Frenchie was with me, and we then split up. Frenchie and I had the night shift, while Butcher and took the day shift of watching him. Each was 12 hours so we could keep a 24/7 hour eye on him. Make sure Butcher doesn't fuck this up, I say as sighs but nods his head. Frenchie and I then head back to the hotel, where we get to know one another better. Frenchie was surprisingly open about his past issues and what brought him to the team. Then again he might suspect I know most of it, considering my connections. You know, one day when I was 10, my father was hit by his bipolar tendencies. And my father tried to smother me with a Hello Kitty duvet. Then I ran back home to my mother. While we were living in Marseille, my father kidnapped me in the middle of the night from my mother and kept me with him for years, living from one hotel to another. Every few nights, he would take me out for a walk to smoke a cigarette and tell me he loved me. However, he would also burn me with the very same cigarettes. I tried to run away, jumping buses and trains or anything to return to my mother, but I was found by my father every time, Frenchie says with a sad laugh. For me, it was my mother, as I was the illegitimate son of my mother's affair with the groundskeeper. She ignored me as long as I could remember pretending I didn't exist. Then one day when I was 10, word got out this was the case, so my father confronted her about it. They got into a physical argument, where my real father intervened. He shot my fake father who I thought was my real father. So in anger and panic, I grabbed the gun from him and shot him in return. That's when they told me the truth after I killed my real father. Then I ran from home never looking back, I say thinking back on the memories of my current life. Fucking parents, Frenchie says shaking his head and looking at me in a new light seeing we both suffered at the hands of our parents. To our shitty upbringings, I say as we toast with the scotch I bought earlier. We then spent the next couple of hours drinking and talking, and then Frenchie got slightly drunk before turning in for our shift later. I too decided to take a quick nap before we had to head out. Then my phone got a text waking me up. It was from telling us their current location so we could take over for them. Frenchie, let's go, we got a job to do, I say waking up Frenchie who yawns nodding his head then using the bathroom real quick before we leave. We then quickly made our way to and Butcher who were sitting outside of a cafe drinking some coffee. We didn't make eye contact but didn't need to as the two got up and walked away. From there Frenchie and I saw Bloodhound who was in the cafe doing a signing. Frenchie and I then ordered some coffee, took seats outside, and sat on our phones to pass the time. After an hour we stood up and left for the bookstore down the street. There we passed the time while regularly watching the cafe. Finally, after another hour Bloodhound left and started walking down the street. Frenchie motioned his head to me to follow. There we stepped outside and followed behind Bloodhound by a few dozen feet. The man appeared to be doing his patrol of the area as he stopped a few people who were breaking the law, like jaywalking. Just lecturing them about following the law like good citizens. You think he is serious about the law or just keeping his image up? Frenchie asks me as we see him stop the next person who is jaywalking. Doubt it, the guy is probably just keeping his image up. Plus let's be honest he seems to have been mostly targeting the minorities, I say as the current person he stopped was of Hispanic descent. Frenchie nods his head while taking out another cigarette to smoke and hands me one. Fucking racists, Frenchie says after lighting up his cigarette and handing me the lighter as I nod my head. Like that, we follow him for the rest of our shit and switch back with Butcher and They came to us in the park we were waiting at as it faced his house. Frenchie and I then went back to the hotel to wait until our time came again. Like that, the next couple of days went by without a hitch. However, on the 4th day, Bloodhound seemed more paranoid, sniffing the air more while looking back once in a while. So far it seems he hasn't made up, but now it shows he believes he is being followed. Then Frenchie and I switched with and Butcher again. That night we saw Bloodhound suddenly walk into an ally he was passing by. Frenchie and I shared a confused look before slowly walking toward it. As I gestured to Frenchie to not run but be causal. We passed by the ally and as we walked past it we saw Bloodhound waiting by the corner. He punched me in the face making me stumble back a few feet, but he grabbed his hand in pain. Frenchie then pulled out his gun which had a silencer and pointed it at Bloodhound who put his hands up. Though I can see he was about to make a move from the subtle muscle clenching in his movements. I pushed Frenchie out of the way as Bloodhound was about to kick him, then I grabbed Bloodhound's leg and tackled him to the ground. Bloodhound let out a surprised yell, as I then began a ground and pound smashing his face in. Frenchie was quickly watching my back and making sure no one was nearby. With only a final punch I knocked out Bloodhound and his body went limp. Call them and tell them we need to leave now, I say while standing up and handcuffing Bloodhound with the heavy-duty flexi cuffs. I know his only superpower was his superhuman smell and slight durability, nothing else. Get to us now, we have the package, Frenchie says after he calls either or Butcher. Frenchie then stood outside the ally casually smoking, while I dragged Bloodhound's body behind some trash covering it the best I could. A few people walked by as I hid behind the trash with Bloodhound still knocked out. Frenchie just gave them a friendly nod as they walked by. Then after 10 minutes, Bloodhound started to wake up, but with a switch jab, he was knocked back out. Finally, and Butcher arrived with the van. What the hell happened? Asks as Butcher backs up the van into the alley. The bastard spotted us, seems he connected our scents, I say picking up his body and throwing him into the back of the van. Shit, okay, says as we all climb into the van. To the interview area, I say as Butcher peels off to the abandoned factory at the edge of the city we planned to use when we captured Bloodhound. When we arrived, Frenchie ran out and prepared the tools for the information extraction, while secured the area, with Butcher's help. I grabbed Bloodhound and put him on the steel chair we placed here. Then I used real handcuffs to cuff all his arms to the chair and legs together. Wake him up, I say to Frenchie as I stand in front of Bloodhound with Frenchie ready to extract the information from him. Frenchie then pours some water on the head of Bloodhound making him snap awake. He looks around in confusion and then fear as he makes eye contact with me, even though his one eye is now swollen shut. Frenchie is going through the tools while thinking about what he wants to use first. Who are you? What do you want? Bloodhound says and looks over to see Frenchie going through the tools. Don't worry about who we are, just worry about what we are going to do if you don't answer our questions honestly. I tell you whatever you want to know. Bloodhound says while looking over to Frenchie nervously as he grabs a plier. Tell me about your friends in the superhero business. I want to know who you know and who they are, I say pulling up another chair and prepare to write down what he tells me as Frenchie is waiting next to him with an excited look. Okay, just let me think, Bloodhound says as Frenchie looks at me with a raised eyebrow. I'm waiting, I say looking at him with slight impatience. I mean I know Bloodhound starts to say as I nod to Frenchie who grabs his hand and rips out a fingernail making Bloodhound scream in pain. I want superhero names, their powers, who they are, and where they are. I shout over his screaming as Frenchie tosses his fingernail to the side. For the next hour, we get everything we can from him though Frenchie had to pull some more nails too. Then threatened his life if he talked, before knocking him out and uncuffing him leaving him behind. We all then quickly made our way back to New York City. There Frenchie and I told and Butcher the info we got before I called Grace telling her the same. Chapter 22, ch 22. Like that, we slowly worked our way through one soup to the next for the next few years. It was a long process, but we couldn't afford anyone finding out about us. Then after stalking one of the 7 for months, Lamplighter we found an angle we could use to blackmail him. Boys, check it. Says as we are all waiting for Lamplighter to come to our hidden base in New York City. Then shows us a few pictures of him and his girlfriend Monique getting engaged. Congrats man, I say patting his back. Yeah, that is mighty fine mate. Butcher says with a laugh as we all have a short celebration for What's going on? Grace says walking in and handing me a file. Got engaged, Frenchie says as nods his head showing off the pictures. That's great Marvin, I hope you both have a happy and long life together, Grace says with a genuine smile while looking at the pictures. The files Grace handed me were the blackmail files we had on Lamplighter. A few minutes after Grace showed up, Lamplighter walked in. He was wearing his superhero costume, which was a long black leather trench coat, covering a black skin-tight leather outfit, boots, fingerless gloves, a hood, and welding goggles. We all stared at him for a few seconds before everyone started laughing seeing his ridiculous outfit. Fuck off. Lamplighter says with a defensive voice seeing us laughing at his expense. Yeah, don't get your knickers in a pinch, Butcher says as Lamplighter's staff brightens for a second showing Lamplighter's anger. Here look at these, I say handing the files to Lamplighter as his face darkens seeing the info we have on him. So, if you don't want your reputation to be completely destroyed, that means you are now our eyes and ears inside the 7, Grace says to Lamplighter. No way, if I get discovered I'll be worse than dead. Lamplighter says shaking his head denying helping us. Then I guess this will be handed out to all the new agencies in the hour and your reputation will be gone, Grace says shrugging, as Lamplighter's staff brightens again showing his anger. Then after a few 10 seconds, he speaks up. Fine. I will work for you, Lamplighter says with gritted teeth. Good, then take this and we will contact you in the morning for your orders, Grace says, handing him a burner phone. Lamplighter takes the phone, pockets it, and quickly leaves while grumbling to himself. After he leaves, Butcher, and Frenchie immediately start making fun of his outfit. Grace chuckles hearing them, as I stare at the spot Lamplighter left in, as I had a bad feeling about this one. We need to watch him. I have a feeling he will retaliate, I say, breaking the jokes and making everyone turn serious. What makes you say that? Butcher asks me, and we've all grown closer during our time together like a small family. However, they still don't know about the real me. I've met a lot of people in my time. Learned to read them, and he seems like someone who acts first and thinks later, I say as they all nod their heads. We'll take shifts of watching him for a while. Who was next on the watch schedule? I say to the group and turn to look at them. Frenchie, says as Frenchie grumbles. Then Frenchie, go now and don't let him out of your sight, I say as Frenchie nods his head and grabs his gun before running off to find Lamplighter. Everyone else, get some rest, and see you in the morning. Congrats again, I say as smiles, nodding his head. We all head home, though I had a small apartment in the city paid for by the government. There I went into my room, passing my neighbors who were going about their business. Once inside, I went to the balcony grabbing a drink and some cigars. I spent the next couple of hours drinking and smoking. Then as I was about to turn in, I got a call from Frenchie. Logan, an emergency popped up. I need to handle it, I need to leave. Lamplighter is currently at the club, Frenchie says to me, sending me the address. Right, go take care of it. I'll get there ASAP, I say, and quickly running out the door. I quickly make my way there. However, as I arrive, the place seems to be in the process of closing for the night. I asked around about Lamplighter, but people say he left a few minutes before it closed. I then traced the burner phone we gave him, which we can trace since it has a GPS secretly installed in it for us to trace. Fuck, I think seeing the trace show me that he was heading toward Grace's house. I then quickly called Grace and started running at full speed toward her house. Grace, Lamplighter is on the way to your house. Get out now, I say as soon as she answers. I hear her curse before hanging up. I can run as fast as Usain Bolt and keep the pace for miles. However, I could have run faster, but my bones weigh me down. As soon as I arrive, I see Lamplighter sneaking into the house. I charge after him and I see him standing by Grace's bedroom door. Fucking bitch, I hear Lamplighter mumble, just about to burn the place, but I jump toward him. Oh, phew, Lamplighter says, turning to see me launching myself at him. He quickly turns to light me on fire, but I reach him before he can light me on fire and I slam into him. We crash into Grace's wall, breaking it slightly from my weight alone. Lamplighter rolls on the ground trying to catch his breath. I then stomp on his face, knocking him out. I grab his staff and press a button which turns the fire off at the top. Bitch, I say while standing above him. Grace, you there? I shout to see if she is still home. However, instead of Grace, her two grandkids pop their heads out of her room. They look at me and then Lamplighter before their eyes widen. I put my hands up trying to not look threatening. Listen, I start to say as they close the door and lock it. Fuck, I think, and then grab my phone to call Grace. Are they okay? Grace says as soon as I call her. Yeah, they are. However, I woke them up after taking Lamplighter down and they locked themselves in your room, I say to her while using the zip-tie cuffs to make sure Lamplighter can't move. Good. Thanks, Logan, Grace says, letting out a heavy sigh. No problem. What is your ETA? I say while picking up Lamplighter and texting Butcher to get the van and meet me here. 5 minutes, Grace says as I bring Lamplighter to her dining room and close her front door. See you then, I say, hanging up and calling Butcher. What's going on? Butcher asks me as I hear him running and then getting into the van. Lamplighter tried to kill Grace's grandkids. I was able to stop him before he could, I say as I hear Butcher start letting out profanities about Lamplighter. Where was Frenchie? Butcher says after cursing out Lamplighter. He had to handle some personal business. So I took over for him, but it seems Lamplighter used the time between the switchover to escape, I say as I sit down next to Lamplighter, making sure he doesn't try anything. Well, at least you stopped the bastard, Butcher says. See you soon, I say, hanging up. Then a few seconds after I hung up on Butcher, Grace came running in. She looked over at me as I nodded my head to her. Grace then ran upstairs to her room and I could hear her hugging her grandkids. They talked, as Grace apologized to them and tried to explain that the man wasn't the real Lamplighter but some crazy guy, that I was a friend who she asked to check up on them. Then Butcher walked inside since the front door was left open when Grace ran inside. The fucker still knocked out, Butcher says, giving a hard glare to Lamplighter. I look at Lamplighter and open his eyelids to see rolled back eyes. Yep, I say, nodding my head. Open the van, I say, grabbing Lamplighter, as Butcher takes the staff and we go outside. I toss Lamplighter inside the van in a harsh manner. Butcher takes the staff to the front with him. I then step inside the back to watch Lamplighter. As we drive back, Lamplighter starts to stir as I text everyone that we are headed back home with the package. For now, I let rest and celebrate his engagement. When we pulled into the warehouse, Lamplighter woke up and looked around confused before looking at me. Let me go? You will regret this. Wait until the 7 find out. Lamplighter starts to say, but I can hear the fear and desperation in his voice. Shut the fuck up, before I knock your teeth down your throat, I say to him, making him snap his mouth shut. Then I hear Butcher knock on the back of the van, signaling that we arrived and it is safe to come out. I open the van and Butcher is grabbing a metal chair so we can chain up Lamplighter to it. I grab Lamplighter by the ankle and drag him out, making him grunt in pain as he slams into the ground. Then I pick him, placing him on the chair as Butcher starts chaining him to it. A single wrong move and we find out two things. First, if you are bulletproof, and second, if you like your kneecaps, I say, taking a gun out and placing it on his knee while Butcher chains him. Lamplighter looks down at the gun with a pale face, not knowing if he is bulletproof either. Butcher then moves to his hands as I keep the gun on his knee, with Lamplighter sitting still nervously staring at the gun. Then I pulled the gun away once Butcher finished securing Lamplighter to the chair. Now, we wait for the others, I say as I take off Lamplighter's hood and goggles so we can see his face underneath. What are you guys gonna do? Lamplighter says as Butcher and I stand to the side preparing the interrogation tools. Butcher ignores him as we set up, but I turn to Lamplighter. Depends on what our boss wants us to do. You did try to kill her grandkids, so chances are, you are dead, I say, shrugging as Lamplighter's face goes completely pale. I didn't try to kill any kids. I didn't know they were there. I thought it was just the woman. Lamplighter says, trying to defend his actions. Though now we both ignore him as he starts begging us to let him go. However, Butcher and I just stare at him with disinterest and Butcher pours us some drinks. Then the first person to arrive was Frenchie, who walked in and gave a very angry glare toward Lamplighter. He then looked at us with a very apologetic face. Miss Amos, I'm sorry. But my friend, he needed my help, Frenchie says as Butcher glares at him, still upset. Frenchie almost let Grace's grandkids burn to death. Shit happens, though next time it might lead to casualties, I say to Frenchie, who nods his head in understanding. You almost got her grandkids burned, Butcher says with some anger in his voice. Frenchie just winces at the glare from Butcher. No fighting, not in front of our guest at least, I say before things could escalate. Butcher grunts and we all go back to watching Lamplighter, who is now mumbling to himself in fear. Frenchie then begins going through the tools with a smile while staring down Lamplighter. Chapter 23, ch 23. Frenchie, Logan, can I talk to you? Grace says, walking in as Butcher stays behind to watch Lamplighter. What the fuck happened? Grace asks us as we walk into another room and close the door. I'm sorry, my friend, they were overdosing and I needed to help. So I called Logan to cover me, Frenchie says, looking down in disappointment at his failure. Grace, I start to say, but she holds up her hand before sighing and rubbing her eyes. Surge. This will not happen again, understand? Grace says, looking at Frenchie with a very serious face, leaving no argument. Yes, Frenchie says, nodding his head. Then go prepare the tools, Logan, and I need to talk, Grace says, dismissing Frenchie. How fucked are we? Grace says once Frenchie leaves. Depends. How do you want to handle this? If we kill him, it will be discovered eventually, leaving us a small window to operate. If we force his hand to spy on us, well, he might try something like this again. Your call, I say as she nods her head. Come on, Grace says, walking into the room as Lamplighter is looking at Butcher and Frenchie, who are discussing what tools to use. Why my grandkids? Grace says, walking over to him and staring him down with hatred in her eyes. She asked you a question, unless you want us to pull it out of you, Butcher says, and holds up a piler while giving a crazy smile to Lamplighter since he didn't answer right away. I thought it would have just been you? I didn't know your grandkids were there. Lamplighter says as Grace narrows her eyes at him. So, you wanted to kill me. What did you think would happen after you killed me? Grace says as Lamplighter goes quiet again, trying to think. Frenchie then walks over and grabs a blowtorch before burning Lamplighter's thigh, making him scream out in pain. Cause I thought you'd leave me alone after. Lamplighter screams as Frenchie burns him, making Frenchie stop the torture. Damn, you really are fucking stupid. We'd only come after you harder and kill you, Butcher says, glaring at Lamplighter. What's stopping me from having my men drug you and burn you down in your house, making it look like you got high and killed yourself? Grace says while staring him down. I'll be your spy, Lamplighter says right away as Frenchie looks excited to burn him again. How can we trust you? Grace says, showing no emotion, having gotten a hold of her anger. We can't, I say before he can answer. You can? I'll give you my phone and you can track everything I do, Lamplighter says, desperately trying not to be killed. Anyone can do that, mate, plus what's stopping Vought from seeing we messed with your phone? Butcher says, snorting at Lamplighter's suggestion. I say we kill the fucker and find another way into the 7, Butcher says, looking over to Grace, who goes quiet thinking. Please. I'll do whatever you want, Lamplighter says, looking at us all desperately. Frenchie is looking at Grace, waiting for an order, while I think about how we can try to assure Lamplighter's allegiance. Frenchie, don't kill him just yet. Butcher, Logan, come with me, Grace says as Frenchie smirks and starts burning Lamplighter for fun, making him scream out in pain. Any thoughts? I know yours, Butcher, Grace says before Butcher can speak up again about killing Lamplighter. I'm on the fence. We could kill him and do our best to make it look like an accident. However, we don't have any other leads and are not sure when we'd get another for the 7. Plus I can't think of a way we can assure he doesn't fuck us over, I say as Butcher nods his head agreeing with me. Shit, okay, Grace says, nodding her head and going back to thinking as Lamplighter is screaming in pain since Frenchie is having fun with him. Wait, doesn't Vought put trackers into their soups? We could hack into it and use it to track him. Plus we could make a program that bugs his phone. However, that is if you know someone capable of that, I say, shrugging and looking to Grace, who nods her head. I can think of a few people. Let me make a few calls and then I'll let you know what we are doing in an hour, Grace says as Butcher and I head back to see Lamplighter passed out from the pain as Frenchie is cursing since the torch is broken. Putain de pute. Frenchie says while throwing the torch across the room. English Frenchie, Butcher says walking past him to grab his drink. Frenchie just mocks Butcher before turning to me. What did the Colonel decide? Frenchie asks since Grace's codename is the Colonel. Waiting on her to make some calls, I say as he nods his head. Wake him up, Grace says walking back in. Frenchie grabs some water and pours it on his head waking Lamplighter up as he looks around in fear. Grace then walks closer to him as he stares at her in nervousness. You will get to live for now. However, you are our eyes and ears. The second we suspect you of anything or you step out of line, you will die, Grace says to him. Call whoever it is you report to and tell them you won't be coming in tomorrow on account of your drunken state, Grace says nodding to Butcher to release him. Lamplighter nods his head and takes his phone from Frenchie who hands it over to him. Lamplighter then makes the phone call saying exactly what Grace told him to say. Now we wait, Grace says and within the hour a CIA SUV arrives. We let them in and walking out of the SUV are 3 people, the driver who looks to be a standard CIA agent, a young woman holding a laptop and a middle-aged man with a metal briefcase. The driver then opened the trunk grabbing another larger metal briefcase. Colonel, the agent says nodding his head to Grace. Get started, Grace says as they put their things down. Butcher grab a table for Lamplighter to lie down on. Logan, hold down our friend. Frenchie stand by in case he tries anything, Grace says as Frenchie grabs his gun cocking it and nodding to her. Lamplighter lies down on the table giving Grace a nervous look. I grab him by the shoulders making sure he doesn't move. Then Butcher handcuffs him to the table letting me step back as the middle-aged man uses what looks like a metal detector to scan Lamplighter's body. The machine beeps at his right shoulder and the man nods to the young woman. The young woman then begins typing away while opening the smaller briefcase. Inside is a small tracking chip, but it also has a small amount of explosives. The middle-aged man opens the larger briefcase showing medical supplies to operate on someone. The man then opens up Lamplighter's shoulder making him grunt in pain. The man takes out the small tracking chip from bot and hands it to the woman. The woman then begins typing away for about 10 minutes. She makes a few annoyed faces before finally sighing and handing the new chip to the man. The man then places the chip back in the same spot as the bot one. The 3 people then gather their things up before quickly leaving the site. Grace nods to Butcher to release Lamplighter. Grace turns to look at Lamplighter who is staring at Grace with confusion and worry. We replaced your tracker chip with one of our own. But don't worry, bot won't know what we did. However, our chip also has some explosives in it. That way if we feel you fucked us we can push a button and boom, your upper torso and head are a fine red mist, Grace says making the hand motions of an explosion at the same time. Here is your new phone too, the same as your old one just modified. Your handler will be Butcher here. You are to check in with him twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. Failure to do so will lead to you exploding, Grace says while staring down Lamplighter who is staring at her in horror taking this all in. Do you understand? Grace says as Lamplighter is sitting in silence. Yes. Lamplighter says with a defeated sigh and looks down like someone killed his puppy. Good, for now, you will report the day after tomorrow like normal. Anyone asks about your injuries, you say you fucked around and burnt yourself. Butcher will contact you later with instructions once we establish a plan of action. For now, keep Butcher updated on any important information on the check-ins, Grace says to him as he nods his head and still looking down. Now get the fuck out of here, Grace says as Lamplighter then quickly leaves but Frenchie whistles to him making him stop. Then Frenchie tosses Lamplighter his staff and he quickly runs off again. You sure this is a good idea? Butcher asks Grace with a doubtful look. No, but it is the best way for us to worm our way into the 7, Grace says rubbing her eyes tiredly. Everyone go home, Grace says as we all take our leave. Over the next few months, Lamplighter dutifully checks in with Butcher out of fear for his life. However, he is becoming paranoid that Homelander suspects something. Though we doubt it since from what we can tell Homelander isn't acting out of normal for himself. Butcher though, is ready to fight Homelander at the drop of a hat. Then by the end of 2015, A-Train took over Mr. Marathon's place in the 7, becoming the first black man in the 7. At the beginning of 2016, got married to his fiancée, now his wife. Their daughter was the ring bearer for them at the wedding since she was 2 years old then. Surprisingly Butcher was the best man at the wedding, with Frenchie and I being a part of the groomsmen. By 2017 Lamplighter was able to collect a lot of insider information on the current members of the 7, giving us plenty of blackmail material for us to use against them. From what we learned, the Deep and Queen Maeve seem to be the weakest links. The Deep since he appears to be a total jackass with less than average intelligence, while Queen Maeve seems to be wanting a way out of the 7, as her relationship with Homelander appears to be fake. Plus from what Lamplighter can tell, she was becoming increasingly depressed and turning to alcohol to get by. A-Train appeared to be a huge supporter of Homelander and extremely loyal to Vought, willing to do anything if it meant being a part of the 7. Translucent appeared to be just as dedicated to the 7 as A-Train, while Black Noir was extremely loyal to Homelander. Hey, Lamplighter says walking into the warehouse as we are going about our day. Grace wasn't here since she doesn't appear much in person unless absolutely necessary. Hey Flamio, Butcher says mocking Lamplighter like usual. Frenchie just ignores him, while sighs hearing Butcher. I just watch from the side going through the latest files we have on the 7. Why are you here? I say before Butcher can continue to fuck with Lamplighter. Butcher asked me in. Said he wanted me to tell you about a way to get another one of the 7 on our side. Lamplighter says to us as we all turn to Butcher with a confused look just hearing about this. Butcher, we should have discussed this before he arrived. I say, annoyed that we are just hearing about this. But then Flameboy wouldn't be able to tell you the juicy info himself. Butcher says, smirking at Lamplighter, who sighs. What is it? I say after letting out an annoyed sigh from Butcher fucking around. Chapter 24, ch 24. Well, as you know, the Deep is extremely stupid and very impressionable. I've become friends with him and I believe we can bring him to our side. Lamplighter says, and after the last couple of years, he has gained Stockholm Syndrome. Lamplighter is now more of a fellow boy, at least he believes he is. Okay, but the issue is the fact that you said the Deep is a complete moron. How could he be useful? Hell, he might just fuck everything up, plus what would you do? Walk up to him and ask him to follow you here and then we are supposed to brainwash him into joining us. I say to Lamplighter, who opens his mouth but closes it to think. You really fucked this one, Butcher, says, snorting after hearing Lamplighter's plan. I didn't know that was it. I thought he had a more thought out one. Butcher says, defending himself. The Deep has been telling me how much he has come to hate the 7. You guys have no idea what Homelander is really like. The rest of the 7 bully the Deep and force him to do all these stupid things. I really think he would join us if it meant getting back at them, Lamplighter says, trying to justify his reasons. No, the Deep is too much of an idiot to bring into our group. What about Queen Maeve? I thought she was someone we might be able to bring to our side. I say to him as everyone turns to Lamplighter. I don't know enough about her other than what I already told you. She is very distant and cold to everyone, only Homelander being the one she is cordial to. Every time I try to talk to her she threatens to tear my balls off, Lamplighter says as Frenchie chuckles hearing him. What do you want us to do? Says, turning to me. For now we do nothing. Lamplighter, you will do everything you can to learn more about Queen Maeve and try to befriend her. She is our second attempt into the 7, I say as Lamplighter grumbles but nods his head. Fine. I just hope she doesn't really take my balls off, Lamplighter says, walking off. Butcher, next time that jackass has a plan, you learn what it is and then inform us before moving forward, I say after Lamplighter leaves. Yeah, my bad, Butcher says, walking off too. Over the next several months Lamplighter tried his best to grow closer to Queen Maeve but failed to do so. Then toward the end of 2018, Lamplighter called an emergency meeting at the warehouse. Everyone arrived there, even Grace, as Lamplighter has never called an emergency meeting until now. What is this about? Grace asks Butcher as we are waiting for Lamplighter to arrive. No idea, he was just super panicked and freaking out. Wouldn't elaborate over the phone, Butcher says, shrugging. They found out. Lamplighter says, yelling as he enters. Everyone then immediately grabs guns and points them at him, making him come to a complete stop holding his hands up. Found out about us. Grace says, ready to blow up Lamplighter's head. No, about me and my urges, Lamplighter says, correcting himself, and we all let out a sigh before Grace motions for and Frenchie to secure the area just in case. Explain, Grace says as Lamplighter nods his head nervously. I think Black Noir was looking into me, thinking I was betraying them, which I mean I am, but anyway he only found out about my interests. They called a meeting today with me and gave me an ultimatum. Said I have to retire or be publicly shamed and removed forcibly. You have to help me. Lamplighter says as Grace rubs her eyebrows in annoyance and Butcher rolls his eyes. Not our problem, mate, though now you are a loose end, Butcher says as Lamplighter's face pales. Wait, where are they sending you? Or are they just making you retire and leaving you to your devices? I ask before anyone can make a hasty decision. They said they have another job for me if I retire, not sure what, since they wouldn't tell me unless I agreed. I told them I needed to think about it and they gave me a day to consider it, Lamplighter says while giving me a hopeful look. I say we let him retire and see what job they offer him. It might lead us to another place we can use against them. We already gathered a lot on the 7 and should not focus on other areas to bring Bot down. I say, giving my thoughts since Grace hasn't given us the okay to move on Bot. It could also be a dead end. I say we clean up the mess and move on, Butcher says as Lamplighter looks confused, but we know he means to kill Lamplighter. We can always do a deep clean later. I agree with Logan, we should see where this leads us, Grace says as Butcher grunts in annoyance. Lamplighter, you are hereby ordered to accept their offer and work at this new job. We want intel on what it is they are going to be having you do, Grace says as Lamplighter looks angry now. What? That, Lamplighter says but stops when Grace holds up her phone showing the button she can press to make him die. Fine. Lamplighter says angrily walking off. Butcher, get Frenchie, and watch him. Any sign of betrayal and he dies, Grace says as Butcher nods walking off to find Frenchie. Logan, while I'm here I should tell you. I'm retiring in a few weeks and they already have my replacement in mind. She will be informed of our operation here and you will be coordinating with her. However, I will still be there if you need me with my connections, Grace says handing me a file on a woman named Susan Rayner. Time, my worst enemy, I say while looking at the file with Grace giving me a sad smile. I know. I'm starting to understand why you never settled down, Grace says to me, seeing me always leaving my loved ones behind. Yet, I still manage to hurt myself by finding friends, I say with a sigh as Grace places a hand on my shoulder. So what happened? Says walking back. Lamplighter has a new assignment, not in the 7, he is getting removed. Was not happy about it, but understands his position. I say since Grace didn't bring up her retirement to the others, I wasn't going to either. Plus I'm retiring in a few weeks. Your new unit's handler will be Susan Rayner, the new deputy director, Grace says handing the file she gave me to MM. I see. Well, congratulations on the retirement, ma'am, MM says shaking her hand while looking through the file quickly. Right, congratulations, I say offering my hand, which Grace moves away and gives me a hug instead. MM looks surprised as Grace never shows much emotion, but always knew we had a bond before the unit. Tell the others and destroy that when they are done looking at it, Grace says taking her leave and leaving the file behind for Frenchie and Butcher to look at. So, I never did ask, but how do you and the Colonel know each other? MM says now letting his curiosity get the better of him. Met years ago before the unit was made. We worked together for a time too, I say not elaborating further. MM just nods his head and does not pry further. After the others come back confirming Lamplighter is taking the loose in Grace, we inform them of Grace's retirement. Frenchie and Butcher were upset about it since we've been working with her for years. Though they understood, and once they read the file on our new boss we burned it. That night we all head to our homes, though I head to the local dive bar nearby. The usual, the bartender asks me since I've been coming here for years now. I just nod my head as he pulls a new bottle of Lagavulin for me out. He then gives me a glass as I walk over to one of the empty tables after paying him and pouring myself a drink. The place also doesn't care if you smoke inside since basically everyone here does too, so I pull out a new cigar and light it up. I sit in silence enjoying the drink and cigar while coming to terms with beginning to lose another friend to time. Fucking bit. I look over to see a woman headbutt a man who then collapses unconscious. The other two buddies of his walk over to make more trouble it seems. With a sigh, I stand up as the bartender and I share a look to intervene. However, before we can get involved the woman punches the one in the face and kicks the other in the nuts. Then she grabs the beer bottle from the first man smashing in on the head of the one she punched in the face knocking him out too. Then with a hammer punch, she knocks out the last man who crumbles to the ground. Nice hits, I say looking at her and when she looks up I instantly recognize her unlike everyone else it seems, Queen Maeve. Thanks, Queen Maeve says sitting back down as the bouncer now walks over dragging them outside after pocketing their money. Frank, I want to buy her a drink, I say as she raises an eyebrow. Just for the show you put on nothing else, I say though a part of me is now gonna try to become friendly so we can get an informant in the 7 again. Alright, Queen Maeve says nodding her head. So, haven't seen you in this bar before. New to town. I say trying to make conversation, which she can easily tell. Again not trying to hit on you, just curious why you would pick this tiny bar out of the whole city's choices, I say as Frank gives me a glare. You know this is a dive bar, Frank, don't give me that look, I say to him as he rolls his eyes. The other ones are too crowded and I like the quiet before those idiots tried to hit on me, Queen Maeve says as I nod my head. Well, enjoy your night then, I say not wanting to become pushy and hoping I can see her again. I then go back over to my table and continue to drink and enjoy my cigar. During that time I feel Queen Maeve look over to me several times. Then after an hour I walked away from her she walked over to me. She takes a seat across from me at the table, I just raise an eyebrow at her. I thought you'd try to hit on me like them too, Queen Maeve says giving me a flirtatious smirk. I know when I'm not wanted. Plus, you seemed to be wanting to be left alone, I say shrugging. True, those bastards almost ruined my night. But you seem nicer and I could use a distraction, Queen Maeve says giving me a look which I believe means she wants to hook up. What kind of distraction? One that could keep you occupied the rest of the night. I say to her with a smirk. Depends, are you offering? Plus who knows, I've yet to find anyone who can keep me occupied all night, Queen Maeve says to me with a flirtatious smirk. Well my night is open, so I'm interested in having some fun, I say to her as she smiles and stands up. Where to? Queen Maeve says giving me an interested look. Follow me, I say grabbing my bottle while tossing 100 francs way on the way out. Chapter 25, ch 25. I bring Queen Maeve to my place where she quickly grabs me pulling me in for a kiss. From the way she is quickly using me, I can tell she is doing this for an outlet as she appears to be very stressed. The night is a very long one, for both of us as neither wanted to concede first. We ended up enjoying ourselves for several hours finishing long after sunrise, before we both came to a silent agreement to not continue. Queen Maeve then stood up and began to put on her clothes. Out of all the women I've been with, she was by far the best one in the bedroom because she like me has superhuman endurance. Not many men or women have satisfied me like that. You should pat yourself on the back, Queen Maeve says to me with a smirk as she grabs my cigarette from my mouth to smoke it herself. I could say the same to you. The women part at least, I don't swing the other way, I say correcting myself before she believes I'm bi or anything similar. So, you just gonna leave? I say to her curious as she finishes dressing herself. Don't tell me you want to cuddle? Plus I have to get to work, if I'm any later, it might make my boss call for me and I'd rather avoid that, Queen Maeve says to me and I believe she is referring to Homelander. Well, can I at least get your name before you go? I say to her to see if she would tell me her name without me having to somehow know it already. Maggie. You can call me Maggie, Queen Maeve or Maggie, says to me with a hesitant face. Oh, before you go, take this, I say standing up and I can feel her gaze on my body as I'm still naked. I then hand her a piece of paper with my phone number. Call if you are looking for another stress reliever, anytime, I say as she gives me a hard look before pocketing it. How'd you know? Maggie asks me just before she leaves, stopping at the door. Cause I've been there before too, I say to her while putting on some boxers. Maggie just takes her leave, not saying anything else. Well, now we might have another way into the 7. Now I just hope she reaches out to me again, I think to myself as I watch her quickly walk toward the city center from the streets below. In the next few weeks, I hear nothing from Queen Maeve/Maggie, but Grace does officially retire. Then Susan Rayner takes over, coming out to meet us, and seems already annoyed by us. As Butcher was a vengeful loose cannon, only held in check by me, with Frenchie a loaded gun ready to strike at my call, the field medic and unregistered group therapist. Then one day as I was smoking in the corner of our warehouse with and talking with Frenchie who was having a bad day, Butcher walked in with an excited look on his face. I raise an eyebrow at him, waiting for him to speak, as Frenchie and turn toward him too curious about his behavior. You have our attention, I say motioning for Butcher to start. Seems, A-Train fucked up. Check this out, Butcher says and walks over to the ghost laptop and plugs in a flash drive. He then opens up a video file. This is now the only copy I believe. I was able to get it before Vought made it disappear, Butcher says and presses play. The video shows just another street on the outskirts of the city, with people going about their day. Then Butcher points to a couple walking on the sidewalk. One is a tall lanky white man who appears to be the embodiment of a nerdy 90s high school kid all grown up. The woman was a fairly attractive lighter-skinned black woman with shoulder-length curly hair and wearing a yellow shirt and blue jean overalls. The couple appeared to be talking about something, and then the woman stepped into the street, just off the curb of the sidewalk. 2 seconds after she stepped off the curb, a blur passed through her and sent her body exploding outward in all directions. The blur came to a stop a few dozen feet down the road and showed it to be A-Train. A-Train said a few words to the young man who appeared to be still holding the young woman's hands in his before A-Train just as quickly left. The young man then let out a scream as other people ran over and called the emergency services. Butcher then stops the video since the rest doesn't matter. A-Train could be our next way into the 7, Butcher says, since I didn't mention my one-night stand with Maggie to the group in case it turned into nothing, which appears to be the case. Possibly. I want to know more about the victims. Butcher, go find out more about this unfortunate couple. See what you can learn and if you can convince this young man to not take Vought's hush money but potentially come forward. We can then maybe force A-Train's hand, I say to them as Butcher and nod their heads before quickly leaving. Frenchie, you and I are friends, right? I say to Frenchie, wanting to talk to someone about my one-night stand with Maggie. Frenchie says to me, since he and I've grown the closest over the years due to our similar upbringings. Don't tell the others, but a few weeks ago I met up with Queen Maeve. We hooked up and I gave her my number in case she wanted to do it again. She hasn't contacted me since, though I just wanted to tell you since it might be a way for us into the 7. Though at the same time, it might blow up in our faces. Should I tell the others? I say to him as his eyes widen hearing the part we hooked up, and then he turns serious as he thinks. No, as you said, it appears to be a one-time thing. No need to make a big deal out of it. Plus if it blows up in our faces, we can deal with it then, Frenchie says to me as I nod my head thankful for his input and coming clean to someone finally. A few hours later, as Frenchie and I shoot the shit, comes back but not with Butcher. Says Butcher is staying back since he believes he can convince the kid to join our cause. We all then head home. The following morning Butcher walks in with a nervous-looking skinny white kid. The one we learned was called Hugh Campbell Jr. Guess who I got to join us? Butcher says while patting the shoulder of Huey, who flinches at the touch. Hey kid, I say as he nods his head to me nervously while Frenchie is giving him a look over. With smiling at him, happy he agreed to help us. So, did Butcher tell you what we want from you? I ask him, curious as to what Butcher told him to get him to join us. Butcher said you guys are a group that takes down soups and makes sure they become exposed to the world for who they really are, Huey says as I shrug my shoulders. Close, though we haven't exposed anyone yet. Mostly because we need to get solid evidence against them. Plus we technically don't have the government's backing, only off-the-books support. So until we get something solid, we have to be very careful about how we operate, I say to him as he nods his head. Though now with you here, we might be able to force A-Train to come forward about what he did. However, we will first need to set up a meeting with him. There you can bug A-Train. With this, I say as Frenchie brings over a small circular bug that Huey can use to place in the headquarters of the 7. Wow. I don't think I can do that. I mean, I'm not a spy, plus can't you guys find someone else to do that? Huey says as his nervousness reaches even higher levels. We used to have someone on the inside, but they were removed for different reasons. Now we are blind in the ongoings of the 7, so we need to get ears in there. Plus none of us can get inside since we don't have a reason to be there. You have a reason to be there if you force their hand to give you the reason, I say to him as Butcher nods his head while patting Huey's shoulder in reassurance. Robin would want this, she deserves the revenge, Butcher says, playing on his feelings for his recently deceased girlfriend. Huey gives him a nervous look, before letting out a deep breath and nodding his head. Okay, I'll do it, Huey says as everyone smiles and pats his shoulder, bringing up his confidence. Then you need to call a meeting with the lawyer, saying you want to meet A-Train in person at the tower. that you want him to take a few pictures and sign some things, then you will sign the NDA and move on, I say to him as Huey gives another nervous look but nods his head. Butcher and will be watching over you, so don't stress too much, I say to him as he nods his head looking slightly more confident. Then Huey pulls out his phone and calls the lawyer, he then does as I say, making the arrangement with the lawyer. The next day Butcher and go with Huey to the tower, dropping him off. Then once everything was done, Butcher dropped Huey back off to his work, since we didn't want to include the kid in the rest of the work. However, an hour later Butcher called me as Frenchie and I were closing up the warehouse. Code red, we have translucent, he found out about Huey and we managed to subdue him. Though we have to bring him back, Butcher says as Frenchie and I quickly open the warehouse back up and prepare for their arrival. Butcher then drives into the warehouse, with and Huey getting out of the car quickly too. I motion for and Frenchie to secure the area, as Butcher walks over grabbing a stun gun and motioning me over. Huey and Butcher looked beat up, Butcher looking at the trunk with bloodthirst eyes and Huey like he was about to throw up in nervousness. He's inside it, Butcher says opening the trunk and inside we see nothing, but I can smell and hear the heartbeat of translucent inside the trunk. I then grab him as Butcher runs over to a cage opening it and we throw translucent inside. Huey, says Homelander can't see through zinc. So we grabbed a bunch of zinc rolls, Butcher says as Huey grabs a bunch of rolls with Butcher while I drag the cage into a smaller room used for interrogation. We then quickly cover the room in the tinfoil zinc everywhere making sure there is no opening. Then Huey and Butcher make the cage bars electrical by connecting them to several car batteries. And Frenchie come back after securing the area, and Butcher, and Huey catch us up to speed about what happened. So our operation is burned and now the Seven knows someone is watching them. Fuck. Okay, what do we do with him? I say as we look into the room with translucent inside. Get some answers to our questions. Then dispose of him, there is no way he won't rat us out once loose, then Homelander will be on our asses, Butcher says as Frenchie nods his head. Fine, wake him up then we ask some questions before disposing of him, I say as Frenchie grabs a cattle prod. Butcher smiles hearing my order, while steals his emotions and Huey looks extremely stressed hearing them. Chapter 26, ch 26. Butcher, Frenchie, and all try getting translucent to talk, but he keeps quiet. Plus other than electrocution there is no way for us to hurt him. The conclusion becomes to dispose of him finally. However, we are having a hard time on how to do that. It's been a day, there is no way the Seven aren't looking for him? Plus we have no idea how to kill him, Frenchie says getting very nervous now, while we are all thinking about how to do it. Are you sure the only way is for us to kill him? Huey says giving us all a nervous look. Would you rather we release him and then let him tell Homelander who will come here and kill us all? Butcher says giving Huey a hard look as nods his head agreeing with Butcher. He's right kid, we have to get rid of translucent, I say as Huey takes a seat and looks down like someone beat him up emotionally. His outside is indestructible, right? What about his insides? Says making everyone look at him as our eyes widen in revelation. That is it. Frenchie says with a laugh nodding his head. I can make a small explosive we can stick up his ass, then we can kill him from the inside out. Frenchie continues quickly running over to the gun/other weapons table. As our medic it is your duty to put the suppository into translucent's ass, I say before anyone can argue who is doing the deed. Rolls his eyes, while Butcher smirks at him. Butcher you need to knock out translucent and ensure he stays unconscious for this. So zap him until he stops moving. Don't care if that fucks him up, I say to Butcher who nods his head with a sadistic smile before walking into translucent's room. Hello, Butcher says with an evil laugh before closing the door behind him. Butcher walks back out in a few minutes as Frenchie quickly finishes the suppository since we have the materials here for him to use. Then takes it and we all go into the room, where Butcher zaps translucent again making the man twitch slightly. Then Frenchie opens the cage, and I stand by the door in case he tries anything. However, translucent appears to be knocked out and Frenchie successfully moves his body for to reach the ass. Shoves the suppository explosive up translucent's ass while grumbling about it. Frenchie then shoves translucent back into the cage before locking it and we all step out of the room. Now we need a distraction for when we explode translucent. Butcher, Frenchie, go find an abandoned place and blow that shit up. When you do I'll kill translucent, I say as Butcher and Frenchie nod their heads grabbing a few more explosives, before jumping into the unmarked van we use. Huey starts to say, stop, if you ask me again if we should do this, I'm gonna slap you. Sometimes you need to get your hands dirty and in this situation, we need to get our hands very dirty, I say before Huey can continue to question our motives. In almost 2 hours, Frenchie and Butcher radio back to us informing us of a perfect place on the other side of the city. Then in another few minutes, they set up the explosives, and once confirmed they radio back. 3, 2, 1, go, Frenchie says and we hear an explosion on their end and I immediately press the one in translucent's ass. We hear a muffled explosion from his room and look over to see a lot of blood leaking from the bottom of the door. Huey starts throwing up as pats his back, while I grunt in disgust from the overwhelming smell of puke. Butcher and Frenchie then quickly head back, as and I start cleaning up the mess of translucent. Huey is cleaning up his puke while we do this. Are you sure this is a good idea? Butcher says as we place translucent's body parts into a metal suitcase, whose insides are lined with zinc. No other choice, I say as Frenchie and Butcher arrive as we are half done. Jesus, what is that smell? Butcher says walking in as Frenchie scrunches up his nose too. Blood, lots of it, Huey says while avoiding looking over at us. Nah, mate, used to that. This smells like someone threw their guts up. Oh, Huey? Come on, Butcher says looking over to Huey who looks away embarrassed. You'll get used to the smell, Frenchie says shaking his head and walking over to help us clean up. Oi, wait, I want to add something, Butcher says before we can close up the suitcase. Butcher then writes coming for you at the top of the suitcase. As I roll my eyes, Frenchie chuckles and sighs. There, perfect, Butcher says standing back and looking at our work. What, they are gonna know someone killed Translucent sooner than later. Might as well give them a small message, Butcher says with a laugh. If you find it funny, then you are in charge of disposing of this, I say to Butcher who grumbles but makes Huey help him take the suitcase. Time for the cleanup protocol, I say once Butcher and Huey leave, as Frenchie and nod their heads. We then gather the remaining weapons and explosives and load them into the other van. As Butcher and Huey took Butcher's shitty ride to dispose of the suitcase. Once we load everything, we dump several gallons of gas all over the warehouse. and Frenchie drive off with the van to our backup location for work, as I toss a Molotov into the warehouse. I quickly walk away as the building is burning behind me. As I walk home I see Homelander flying across the city very quickly, stopping at the burning warehouse behind me. Though I just keep walking away since I'm now a few blocks away. Then I get to the bar I usually stop at and have a few drinks for the night. A few days go by with no word from Vought about Translucent's disappearance, other than stating he is on a special mission making him unavailable for now. Then as we were waiting in our new location we watched the news since we were worried about Vought finding out about us. However, the news showed that the transoceanic Flight 37 from Paris to Chicago was hijacked mid-air by 3 terrorists over the Atlantic Ocean. An hour after the news broke, they informed everyone that the plane was lost at sea. Seems Vought doesn't know about us for now, though we need to lay low for the next week just in case, I say to them as they all nod their heads. We all then head home not scheduled to meet back up for another few days. On the way to the dive bar, I get a text from a number I wasn't expecting. Queen Maeve aka Maggie texted me asking to meet up. I stared at the number for a couple of minutes debating whether or not to answer back. I'm at the place we first met. I text her back leaving it up to her to come find me. An hour after I text her where I'm at, I see her walk into the bar wearing black skinny jeans with a few tears in them for the style. Her hair was down, she had black ankle-high boots, a v-neck white shirt showing off her cleavage, and a black leather jacket. Seeing me she walks over and pours herself a glass of the bottle I usually get from Frank, the bartender. Maggie doesn't say anything just pours herself a few glasses downing around 3 of them before sighing and pouring a 4th to just sip. Then she gives me an apologetic smile. Sorry, just needed a few drinks to calm me down, Maggie says to me as I shake my head dismissing her apology. Don't worry about it, we all have bad days. You okay? I say to her seeing her obviously reaching out to me with the intention to blow off some steam. I'd rather not talk about it. In fact, I was hoping we'd not do a lot of talking, Maggie says to me with a sly smile suggesting she was here for a booty call. Sure, let's get out of here, I say and we make our way to my apartment. There she once again immediately grabs me into a deep kiss, wanting to distract herself from her problems. The night was young but a restless one, as I did everything I could to help her relax and I enjoyed myself a lot as well. Just before the sun rose, we stopped with her putting on one of my shirts. While making some coffee, I raised my eyebrow seeing her deciding to stay a bit this time. I'm not saying you need to talk, but if you do, I consider myself a good listener, I say to her while grabbing some eggs from my fridge and offering her some. I like them sunny side up, Maggie says as I nod my head preparing some eggs for us. I cook in silence, as she waits for the breakfast and coffee to finish. Then I place the plate in front of her with eggs and bacon on it while she pours herself some coffee. We then sit in silence as we eat and drink, enjoying the morning. Have you ever done something that you regretted more than anything else? A mistake so big, that nothing you'll ever do in the future could make up for it. Maggie says to me breaking the silence. A few, though what is done, is done. Nothing I can do can change my mistake. As for making up for it, I'm not sure it would matter, especially since the people it affected are long gone, I say to her while thinking about the men who died under my command over the years. So, you just move on. How do you live with that regret? Maggie says to me with a surprising amount of vulnerability on her face. One day at a time. Just live one day at a time. I stopped letting my mistakes eat away at me and instead made an effort to not make the same ones again, I say to her as she nods her head slowly. Thanks, for everything, Maggie says standing up and getting changed into her clothes. Should I expect a call or text from you anytime soon? I say as she changes. Maybe. I enjoy our time together, plus you are a good listener, Maggie says before taking her leave. Shit, I think to myself as she leaves since this might turn into a regular hookup now. A few days later, after the incident, Homelander told the news that the plane had already fallen when they arrived and they didn't make it in time, because they wasted time trying to get the necessary authorization from the authorities. He then promised that if the government allowed superheroes to join the military, such incidents would never happen again. With this speech, Homelander gains massive support from the public, possibly more than he and Maeve would have gotten if they had been successful. Then after the news interview, Maggie texts me to meet up again. We had another night of hooking up, with her staying again afterward to talk. Chapter 27, ch 27. Have you ever worked with someone you hate? Maggie asks me as we sit and eat the breakfast I made for us again. A few times, though I usually just ignore their dumbass or act petty around them in spite, I say to her thinking about some of my past moments. Yeah, makes sense. Though my issue can't let me be petty or ignore them. Especially since we work closely a lot and it might make a lot of issues appear should I try to leave, Maggie says to me as I look at her trying to think what to say, but it seems she might be talking about Homelander. That sucks. I'm sorry to hear that. Do you think you might be able to walk away from your job one day? I say to her while trying to poke at what she does since she still hasn't told me who she really is. Maybe. Though not anytime soon, plus there is a new girl and she already is having some problems at work. I feel like if I leave she will be thrown to the wolves and I want to make sure she doesn't end up like me, Maggie says talking about Starlight, the new addition to the Seven. I see. Well, I'm not sure I can do much, but just ask me and I will do what I can to help you, I say to her as she gives me an appreciative look, but a sad smile takes its place very quickly. I appreciate that, but I doubt you can do anything to help me. Hell, I doubt anyone could help me right now, and just by us meeting up could spell trouble for you, Maggie says to me giving me a worried look now. How? I say to her hoping she will open up to me more. Cause, my job, Maggie starts to say, then she gets a phone call and her eyes widen. I'm sorry I have to go, Maggie says quickly hiding who is calling her and running out. Fuck, so close, I think to myself after she leaves. We found her. I see a text that just popped up from Frenchie on my phone. I let out a sigh, before responding back I will be there shortly. Then I take a quick shower, before throwing on some clothes and heading over to them. I walk over to an apartment complex outside the main city. The place looks like any other apartment complex. However, here it houses Popclaw, A-Train's girlfriend, who we can possibly blackmail to find out what had A-Train freaking out the day he killed Huey's deceased girlfriend Robin. Popclaw, from what we know, has cat-like claws and super strength. Popclaw's superpower launched her to stardom at a young age, getting her a place in the storied soup team Teenage Kicks, as well as the starring role in the sexy thriller movie franchise, Terminal Beauty. Then, like many young celebrities who start out on a meteoric rise, her fall from grace came fast and hard when she was photographed by paparazzi while partying half-naked and high on drugs. The damage to her reputation was catastrophic, and she lost everything. Now she just takes on D-list acting jobs to get by, which from the looks of it is just barely. So, find anything new out? I ask as I step into the van parked a few places down watching her apartment from a distance. Not much, just that A-Train visits her not as frequently as she would probably like. Plus she appears to be having money problems. Her landlord has been asking her about the rent this month, Frenchie says, since MM and Huey are walking inside to take control of her electronics on the inside. Where's Butcher? I ask Frenchie while taking a seat inside the van. No idea, said he had something to take care of and he'll be back later, Frenchie says as I roll my eyes and text Butcher to inform me next time he needs to take a leave of absence. Shit. A-Train showed up, I say, seeing A-Train appear outside her apartment. Frenchie then quickly informs Huey and MM that A-Train is on the way up. A few minutes later, MM and Huey came back down after A-Train already entered. Then they walk over to us and enter the van, Frenchie and I give them expecting looks for what happened. MM sighs since Huey looks like he wants to punch the van in anger and frustration. We were able to take over her electronics. Though we ran into A-Train, who didn't recognize Hughie luckily, MM says, opening up a laptop and showing us the inside of the apartment where A-Train is now inside talking with Popclaw. That fucking bastard. He didn't even recognize me. Huey says, very upset that A-Train doesn't even remember the person he met after killing their loved one. Calm down. I understand you are upset, but right now we have a job to do, I say to Huey as he grumbles but goes quiet. If I don't win the race tomorrow, Stillwell told me that I'd be out of the 7 if I lose. I need more compound V, it's the only way I will win the race. You have more right. A-Train says as we all look at one another confused about this compound V. Sorry I'm late, had something to take care of and I promise to let you know next time it was an emergency, Butcher says, getting into the van and then seeing our confused faces. But I hold up my hand to keep him quiet. The last time you used the stuff you ran through that girl, I don't think you should do it again, Popclaw says as Huey grits his teeth in anger, while A-Train stands up in annoyance. Fuck that. I need it or I'm out. I know you have some stashed here. I need it. A-Train says, giving her a very angry look. Popclaw with an annoyed sigh walks into her bedroom. Popclaw then grabs a black duffel bag that was stored in her closet and then walks back to A-Train, who is pacing in her living room. Popclaw then tosses the bag onto her coffee table. A-Train immediately opens it up and takes out a small vial with a blue liquid inside. He smiles while holding it up and then places it back inside the duffel bag while kissing Popclaw in happiness. Thanks, babe, A-Train says while looking like he is ready to leave, having gotten what he came for. Wait, what about tomorrow? I'm still going, right, and we are going to tell the world we are together, Popclaw says while giving A-Train a hopeful look. Yeah, about that. Tomorrow is not going to be a good day. Stillwell thinks we should push it back to another time, A-Train says while looking at her with a faked apologetic look. Are you fucking kidding me? After all the preparation I did, I got plucked like a chicken all over my body to make sure I looked perfect. Popclaw says extremely upset with A-Train now. I'm sorry, but there is nothing I can do about it, A-Train says and goes to give her a hug trying to make up but she backs up placing her arms between them. Get the fuck out, Popclaw says as A-Train sighs but nods his head and then quickly leaves. A few seconds after he leaves Popclaw goes berserk and begins smashing some of her things in anger. She then changes into an outfit she used in some of her movies, which is a tight leather bra and a miniskirt, with knee-high leather boots. Right after she walks over to a secret stash of hers and takes out a vial filled with blue liquid like the ones she gave to A-Train. Popclaw then takes a needle out and draws some of the blue liquid out before shooting it into her arm like a heroin addict. She lets out a growl of anger and euphoria before she starts shadowboxing while bringing out her 2 bone claws from her wrists curving past her hands. Shit, we need whatever that compound V shit is, Butcher says having gotten caught up to speed as Popclaw is doing her thing. No shit, Frenchie says to him sarcastically making Butcher frown at him. What do we do? Huey says while trying to think of a solution. We split up, Frenchie, Butcher you watch Popclaw and see if you can find a way to blackmail or steal some of the compound V from her. While Huey, and I will get into the race between A-Train and Shockwave. We will see if we can steal some of the compound V there if the opportunity arises, I say as they nod, with Frenchie and Butcher staying behind to watch Popclaw. I'll get the tickets for the event. Huey go with and get the supplies ready for the event tomorrow, I say to them as they nod and head off back to the hideout we are using now which is in the basement of a store. It was through the connections of Frenchie that we could stay there without anyone knowing. I pull out my phone and buy us some tickets to the race tomorrow, which I had to spend extra on due to the scalpers. Then I got a press ticket for Huey since he can sneak in that way. At the same time, and I act like regular people coming to watch the race. The following day, switches with Frenchie to watch Popclaw since Frenchie would be better at stealing Compound V secretly. We 3 then head to the race, where Huey gets his camera and press pass making his way to the press area, while Frenchie and I walk into the stands like everyone else. Frenchie then walks off to the area he can climb into to sneak through and get into the locker room from the ceiling, while I watch the race to make sure the locker rooms are clear of anyone. We are all waiting for the race to start, but then I see Maggie down on the track doing an interview. A few seconds later Homelander appears and continues the interview with her. I see Maggie become uncomfortable and annoyed by his presence once he appears. Then the interview ends with Maggie and Homelander walking to the top of the stands where they wave to everyone. Just as they were waving to everyone, A-Train walked out with his team. Frenchie you are clear, I whisper to the comms for Frenchie to steal the compound V. I then turn to look back at Maggie and Homelander. She and Homeland appear to be talking from their lips moving just barely visible. Then Maggie gives an annoyed look to Homelander before we make small eye contact. Then Maggie does a slight double take with her eyes as we look at one another. She gives me a look like a deer in headlights. Maggie then quickly takes her leave as Homelander stands there waving before putting his hand down and smiling at everyone like he is the nicest person to exist. I quickly leave afterward, since during that time Huey appeared to have run into Starlight needing to distract her as she almost walked in on Frenchie stealing the compound V. I make my way to our car, which we borrowed from Butcher, as we are to meet there before leaving. John, I hear Maggie say to me as I walk in the parking lot. I turn to see her give me a look of sadness. Maggie, or I guess Queen Maeve, hey, I say not sure what to say here. She winces when I call her Queen Maeve. Maggie is fine, so, now I guess you know what I do, Maggie says to me giving me an apologetic look. Then I see Frenchie quickly walking over but then stops wide-eyed seeing Queen Maeve talking to me. Fuck, I think as Frenchie is looking at us and needs to get out of here. Chapter 28, ch 28. Can we talk? Maggie asks me as I look at Frenchie who is now calmly walking away. Sure. Though let's do it somewhere else, I say as she nods, gesturing for me to follow her. Maggie brings me to a car that has driven her here, and we get inside it. The driver says nothing about me, as Maggie tells him to take us to the tower. She gives me a look to not say anything yet. We both get out of the car, but she tells me to wait outside the tower. A few minutes later Maggie comes back down, but now wearing her casual clothes. I text the boys to not wait up for me since something important came to my attention and I will meet up with them later. Sorry. I just didn't want to bring you inside since Homelander might see you and take offense, Maggie says as I nod my head and we walk down the street toward my apartment. So, I'm Queen Maeve, Maggie says to me as we walk and I just nod my head slowly thinking of a response. Yeah, I kinda knew that already. I mean you don't cover your face and it's not like you look any different than her. I really have no idea how no one else figured this out already, I say to her as she stares at me for a second and then laughs nodding her head. Shit, you're not wrong. Seems the secret identity of ours is not so secret when you take a minute to think about it, Maggie says with a laugh. Well in a way it works, I know someone famous, and when he puts regular clothes on and glasses no one even notices him. However, as soon as he puts his outfit on everyone recognizes him, I say to her referencing Superman from my past life as she gives me a curious look. Then again it might just be a New York thing, since everyone here doesn't care what's going on around them unless it involves them, I say to her as we pass people who don't even give her a second look. Really bursting my bubble here, Maggie says with a laugh as we finally arrive at my apartment. To be honest, I'm surprised you're not put off by my real identity. Then again, since you already knew, maybe you are a gold digger, Maggie says to me while giving me a smirk at the second part. Two things. First, I like strong women, especially ones that can handle my passion. Secondly, it might not look like it, but I have more money than I care to admit. I just like living like anyone else. Not to say I don't have a fancy home away from everyone, I say to her as I pour us some bourbon. I have. You are very passionate, Maggie says to me with a flirtatious smile. So, I can only assume Homelander and the others don't know about me, I say to her, changing the subject as we start sipping our drinks. Maggie looks off outside the window before sighing and nodding her head in a defeated manner. Yeah, Homelander would not take kindly to your existence, especially since we've grown as close as we have. He is not like what he appears to be like. He is a monster, Maggie says to me while giving me a serious look. I know, I say, nodding my head, making her give me a confused look. I stand up, holding my hand up to make her wait, since it seems I can trust her enough to bring her into the fold. However, how she will feel about me after will be seen shortly. I then grab some of the files I have here on Homelander and the current members of the Seven, including her. I hand her them all, and her eyes widen when she looks through them. Before you get angry with me. In the beginning, when we first met, I was just interested in using you. However, like you said, we've grown closer and I'd rather not use you like that, but hope you will join us in bringing down Homelander and the other soups who are fucked in the head, I say to her as she gives me a hurt and angry look. I can't believe I thought I found a decent person for once. Every fucking time I grow close to someone I get stabbed in the back, Maggie says, standing up and walking to my door, but I grab her wrist, stopping her. Maggie then rips her wrist from my hand but is surprised to see she didn't, as I'm stronger than normal people. Before she can say anything else, I pull her close to me and kiss her. We both are messed up people and like letting off steam through sex, so I figured this might help me patch some things. At first, she resists the kiss, but then gives in and things turn very heated. However, this time she doesn't hold back as I pick her up and slam her into the wall, breaking it slightly. The rest of the day and night is a very long and passionate one, with my apartment being broken by the end with only a handful of things left not broken. You're not a normal human, Maggie says as we finally rest while smoking some cigarettes and sitting on the crushed couch naked. No, you can consider me a soup. However, my team isn't aware of that, considering they hate soups with a passion. They are all there to take down the corrupted and untouchable soups, which so far we've failed in doing. However, we know it is a slow and long process, I say to her as she nods her head. I can help, but I doubt I can do much other than give you some insider information, which you appear to already have, Maggie says while picking up the file on her. You know pretty much everything about me and I know almost nothing about you. Tell me about you, Maggie says to me as I stare at her for a few seconds. Half of me is wary of telling her the truth, the real truth, while the other half wants to open up to her since we've grown closer over the last few months. Having hooked up multiple times, she has slowly opened up to me anyway. Plus, after these last 12 hours, it feels like we've grown closer than most women I've been with. I'll tell you this. My real name is not John Logan. I lived a long life, longer than most, and been through a lot, I say to her, since the part of me not trusting her won out, but the other part let me open up just a bit. I see. I get you have trust issues, believe me, I have them too. I just hope though one day you will open up to me, especially since we are going to be working together moving forward now, Maggie says to me as I sigh, the urge to tell her more growing. I'm sorry, it's just what my team and I are doing is very important. We have to be extremely careful. Hell, letting you know as much as I have already has put us in a jam if you tell anyone. I want to tell you that I must look out for my team and their safety before my feelings. Therefore, I will be the only one in contact with you until, I say to her, until you can trust me. I get it, I do. After learning all you did about most soups, it can be next to impossible to trust any of them, Maggie says with a bitter laugh. I'm sorry, I say to her, and she shakes her head dismissing it. It's fine, though moving forward our relationship is going to be professional only, Maggie says, standing up and putting her clothes back on. Understandable. I will reach out to you should I need you for anything. If you need to tell me anything or need my help, you can contact me like you normally do, I say to her as she nods her head and takes her leave right after. I then shower and come back out to the destroyed apartment, sighing at the mess I will have to clean up later. Then I head to the hideout Frenchie got for us through his connections. Arriving there, Frenchie gives me a raised eyebrow since he saw me with Maggie, though I give him a look to talk about it later. So what happened? I ask them as they all look over to me. Where VE you been? Butcher says to me, giving me a curious look. Something personal came up, don't worry about it. What did I miss? I say to them and change the subject back to what happened yesterday. Well, I got the compound V, however it is mostly used up. So it might be useless, Frenchie says, tossing me the small vial with maybe a few drops of the blue liquid left inside. Shit, okay. Butcher, anything new with Popclaw? I say, putting the vial on the table in front of us. Yeah, we have some great information regarding that, Butcher says, motioning for to talk. I watched Popclaw use a secret stash of hers. She seemed very annoyed by A-Train's remarks after the race, so Popclaw injected the V, and then she did some crazy squat pressing huge barbells, says as I nod my head. Then Popclaw's landlord knocks at the door, asking for her rent, and she invited him in. Then Popclaw and her landlord started some weird roleplay shit, which lead to her crushing his head while sitting on it, says, shuddering at the memory. Death by Snoo. Good for him I guess, I think as the Futurama scene comes to my mind. So then we blackmailed her into telling us what she knows, Butcher continues for What does she know? I say to them. Popclaw said that Compound V comes from somewhere in the vicinity of a noodle shop as A train comes back with the noodles after every V run, Butcher says as I nod my head. Then we need to start a surveillance of it. Frenchie, you guys take the first watch. Butcher and Huey will relieve you both later. I will take the night watch, I say to them as they nod their heads and quickly leave. It took a week of watching the noodle shop before and Frenchie reported back that they are following someone who appeared to have a package. Butcher, Huey, and I quickly make our way over, as and Frenchie motion for us over. They are inside there, no other way in or out. Seems this is the place they are using, says as Frenchie watches the entrance/exit. It is a warehouse full of boxes. Right, Huey, keep watch for anyone coming in and inform us. I will take lead with Frenchie, Butcher, and watch our backs, I say as they nod and we walk inside the warehouse with our guns drawn. We then sneak past a room with several guards inside talking in what sounds like Vietnamese. At the back of the warehouse in a barred room, we find a young woman watching TV. The woman was barefoot, wearing old worn pajamas, and looking like she was homeless. We all give each other confused looks, while Frenchie walks closer to the bars. I then motioned for everyone to split up to look for Compound V. Chapter 29, ch 29. Frenchie, what are you doing? I say as I see the young woman staring at Frenchie blankly. She needs our help, Frenchie says while giving the young woman a friendly smile. Frenchie, leave her alone, Butcher says while looking through the place. Frenchie, this is not the right time for this, says while looking through the place. Logan, she is like us, she needs help, Frenchie says while gesturing to the young woman who has slowly moved closer to the barred door. Fuck it, fine. We can help her, but first, I start to say but then I turn as the man we followed earlier along with his friends enter the room. We all stare at one another awkwardly for a few seconds, before Butcher starts the firefight. Everyone dives out of the way, as bullets begin flying and then Frenchie opens the door to the young woman's room. The men guarding this place all exchanged nervous looks once the door opened. Then the young woman, reminding me of my old self when I lost control, like an animal launches herself at the men guarding this place. The young woman begins using her hands like knives to cut into the men, before shredding them apart like a giant cat. We are all stunned seeing this turn of events watching her. Then the last man, the one we followed, stands up and shoots himself before the young woman can get to him. The young woman then runs off before we can react. Shit. Frenchie, let's go. Butcher, find the Compound V. I say as Frenchie and I quickly run after the woman with Butcher and staying behind. Holy shit, we hear Huey scream ahead of us. We rush out to see Huey having fallen to the ground while looking like he saw a ghost. He points in the direction the young woman ran and we follow after it. However, by the time we returned outside, the young woman was gone. Plus with all the new scents in the air, it makes it next to impossible to single hers out. However, my smell is like that of a bloodhound making it next to impossible for me to lose a scent. Shit, what now? Frenchie says as I hold up my hand. Follow me, I can smell the blood from the people she killed, I say motioning for him to follow me. We quickly follow the scent which leads us to a nail salon, then just as we arrive we hear the women inside screaming. We run inside to see them all looking in the back at a scene of a middle-aged Asian woman who was just killed like the men from earlier. Frenchie and I run past the scene to the back of the nail salon to see the back door flung open. We run outside to see the young woman a few dozen yards down the back alley running. We then run after her and chase her down. Frenchie is having trouble keeping up. Though I don't wait for him and run as fast as the young woman in front of me. He gives me a hard glare looking back at me, but keeps running. Don't wait up, I'll catch up. I hear Frenchie yell as he stops for a breath, while I continue to chase the young woman down. The young woman runs to the more abandoned part of the city, where the homeless mostly live. During that time of running, she looks back at me in surprise seeing me slowly closing the distance, while also not looking out of breath. However, I'm surprised too since not all soups have the endurance like her for the run we've been doing now for about an hour. The young woman then stops in the middle of an abandoned warehouse's yard which is empty except for a few piles of trash littering the ground. She gives me a look like she is warning me to leave her alone. However, I just stare her down while we stand across from one another a few feet away from one another. I just want to ask you a few questions. Can we talk? I say to her holding up my hands. She shakes her head and points away from me, seeming to tell me to leave her alone. I sigh and shake my head. Then she narrows her eyes at me, before launching herself at me like the men earlier. However, unlike them, I've mastered many different fighting styles so I easily sidestep her attack and punch her in the liver with all my strength. This sends her flying a few feet while groaning in pain and rolling on the ground. Then she slowly pushed herself up and charged at me again. This time she controls herself more, using her hands trying to claw at me. However, I'm able to dodge most and deflect the others I can't. Then I grab her arm stopping her and duck under her other hand attack. I grab her other arm, trapping her, and then with a sorrowful look, I headbutt her. Her eyes roll back, but then she shakes her head and kicks me right in the nuts. I instinctively release her arms to block the kick, sighing that I blocked it. Then she claws at my face making me growl in pain as I feel her dig out half my face. The young woman smirks, but then her eyes widen seeing the metal underneath my face before it almost instantly heals back over. I narrow my eyes at her and then bring out my claws now since no one is nearby and I'm annoyed now. Somehow her eyes widen even more before she stares at me in awe. I don't want to hurt you, so please stop before I have to cut you apart, I say to her. She then turns to run. With a growl of annoyance, I launch myself at her and stab her right leg from the back, pinning her to the ground. Then I straddle her from behind and grab her 2 arms after quickly withdrawing my claws. Then I use the heavy-duty cuffs I have on me before cuffing her 2 arms together. She is struggling the best she can to break loose, but I just sit on her back and my appearance doesn't suggest I weigh almost 600 pounds. The others finally arrive with the van, as the young woman at this point just gave up. Then she heard the van and started to struggle again. However, Frenchie came out with heavy ankle cuffs before putting them on her. Then I lifted her into the van as she was failing around. We then quickly took off, back to the hideout. I bring the young woman inside, while we set up a heavy-duty thick chain bolted to the ground in the one corner of the room. Then I attack the heavy-duty cuffs to the chain before removing the ankle cuffs from her. She kicks at me, but I catch her leg and glare at her, slowly shaking my head at her. Over the next few days the young woman refuses to speak, only sitting there staring at us in anger, while Butcher, and Huey head to a religious gathering for Ezekiel, who pretends to be this Christian activist promoting the Bible, anti-abortion, and anti-gay speeches. His followers are more like a cult and support him in whatever he does. However, we know that he is secretly a gay man who loves hooking up with men in his free time. The 3 are headed there to confront and blackmail Ezekiel into giving us more information on the next shipment of Compound V, since Ezekiel has a part in the illegal Compound V being shipped around the country through his organization's charity. While Frenchie and I stay behind to watch over the young woman, trying to get her to talk. Frenchie cooks a meal for the young woman, trying to engage in conversation with her. However, she is unwilling to talk and lunges at Frenchie, who's only saved by the chains that bind her. I sigh seeing this as I walk in the next morning while we wait for the other to get back to us with more information. I'm not sure how to reach her, she is always angry, Frenchie says as I look at the young woman who is glaring at us. She can understand English, meaning she is not deaf, nor blind, only mute. She hasn't responded to my sign language, so she just doesn't want to talk, it seems, I say, shrugging as I sit across from her. Can I ask, what happened the other day with Queen Maeve? Frenchie says, seeing as we are alone except for the young woman with us. We went to the tower where she changed into normal clothes. We then headed back to my apartment where we talked. I told her about our job. She has agreed to be my insider for the 7. However, Starlight might join us too with Huey's help. If we can get both on our side, we can turn things around, I say to him as he nods his head. How much does she know? I mean, you 2 appeared close, Frenchie says as I sigh. Not much, I kept most things secret. My first job is to ensure the safety of you all, I say to him as she gives a bitter laugh. My friend, we've known each other for several years now, Frenchie says, and I nod my head while raising an eyebrow to him. I like to think you and I are close, considering our similar histories of growing up. And I think you are hiding your true feelings about this woman, Frenchie says to me with a smirk. My feelings don't matter, we have a job to do. Plus it would complicate things too much if we got involved. And I doubt it matters either way, as last we met she was very upset, understandably, considering I was lying to her the whole time, I say to him as the young woman has been staring at us the whole time listening to our conversation. If you say so. But I believe everyone deserves happiness, even you, Frenchie says, standing up and walking over to his guns before cleaning them. The young woman then tugs at her chain while giving me a pleading look. I stare at her as Frenchie looks between us. Like my natural connection to animals, I can feel a small connection to this young woman who reminds me of my old animalistic self. With a sigh, I stand up and move toward her as Frenchie watches from his gun table. If I let you free, do you promise not to run or try to hurt any of us? You've been with us a while now and as you can see we just want to help you. Plus for you to answer some of our questions, I say to her as she stares at me for a bit before nodding her head slowly. Fine, I say, taking a key from the other room and coming back to release her. The young woman stretches and smiles at the freedom, before staring at Frenchie and me with a narrowed gaze. Frenchie gives her a nervous look while looking between me and her. Then she walks past me toward the shower we have in the hideout. Frenchie find her some new clothes. Seems we have a new team member, I say to him as he nods to go get some clothes for her. Frenchie then places the clothes outside the bathroom door before walking back to me. You sure that was a good idea? Frenchie asks me as I sigh and shake my head. Nope, but trust has to be started at some point. Plus I have a feeling she isn't our enemy, I say to him as she nods his head. Chapter 30, ch 30. As the young woman was finally set free, she stared at us both before finally sitting down and grabbing some of the food Frenchie made earlier. Just as she was settling in, Frenchie received a phone call. From the sounds of it, it was from his lover and close friend, Cherie. He then hangs up and gives me a nervous and worried look. I'm burned? They found my place and Cherie had to ditch it. Frenchie says to me as my face darkens. Grab our things, this place is no longer safe. However, I know a place we can go to. Grab what we need and set fire to the rest, I say, standing up and calling the others while Frenchie and I quickly gather our things. With the young woman watching us confused, Frenchie and I quickly gathered everything of value while setting fire to our current hideout. Then we quickly leave outside with the young woman following right behind us. As she was looking around with narrowed eyes, we explained to her our cover was blown and we needed to move. Just then I heard the quiet breaths and footsteps of a person about to jump us. I pushed Frenchie away as Black Noir appeared, stabbing me in the chest twice. Black Noir then kicked me away while engaging the young woman in hand-to-hand, but she was very outclassed. Black Noir was slowly cutting her up, while I grunted and stood up with Frenchie rushing to me and seeing my wounds close up. I then kicked Black Noir from behind as he was about to finish off the young woman. He was sent flying several feet and crashed into the building nearby, cracking the wall slightly from impact. He gets up and turns to us as the young woman and I share a quick nod. She runs in using her hands like claws, cutting at Black Noir, who is easily dodging her strikes. However, before he can retaliate, I move in with my superior fighting ability, quickly pushing him back. Black Noir, seeing he is becoming overwhelmed, kicks the young woman away while taking a heavy hit from me, rocking his head back. Black Noir stumbles from my strike. However, before he can escape, I grab him and lift him up over me. Then, like Bane, I bring him down over my knee, snapping his back in half. Black Noir convulses while letting out a grunt in pain. I drop him to the ground, though I walk to his neck and stomp down on it hard, hearing another snap as he goes limp. We need to leave now before others come, I say as Frenchie nods, running to the van and starting it. The young woman limps over and gets inside as I toss Black Noir's body inside too. The young woman is slowly healing up. I use my one claw to cut open Black Noir's right shoulder where the tracking device should be, as Frenchie is driving. Then I dump the tracking device in the city sewage drain, which will lead them on a hopeless chase. Drive to this location, I say, handing Frenchie my address to the home the CIA gave me. Logan, you are a soup. Frenchie says to me with a hardened face. Yes and no, I will explain more once we get there, I say with a sigh as Frenchie nods his head. We then arrive at the house I've lived in for several decades. I grab Black Noir's body and bring it to the back of the house. Frenchie and the young woman follow me. I bring out my claws as Frenchie stares at me with wide eyes. I then cut up Black Noir's body before dumping it in my fire pit and lighting the fire. Clean the van, deep clean. I don't want anyone following the scent of him here. Once the fire is done, I will ensure the smell doesn't lead here either, I say as Frenchie nods, walking off to clean the van after I show him my cleaning supplies. Follow me, I will show you where the shower is and get you some clean clothes, I say, bringing the young woman inside, who stops me. She then writes on a paper in Japanese saying her name is Kimiko Miyashiro. Nice to meet you, Kimiko. My name is John Logan. You can call me Logan though, I say, shaking her hand as she nods her head and smiles at me. I then leave Kimiko inside to shower and change as I make sure the body of Black Noir is completely burned away. I sit by the fire while smoking a cigar, with Frenchie coming back over later while Kimiko comes out too. They both take a seat by the fire, with Kimiko taking a notepad to draw or write to me on it, while Frenchie smokes some cigarettes. So, how are you? Like a soup but not a soup, Frenchie says to me. I consider myself more of a mutant, not like a freak of nature, though I suppose that isn't wrong. I just think I'm the next step of human evolution, while the soups are not natural. I have a feeling they are not natural, then again they might be like me too. Plus I believe I am the first soup since I haven't met one outside myself before WW2. And I was around in the early 1830s, I say to Frenchie, who just stares at me in awe, trying to take in this information, while Kimiko is humming to herself, blissfully ignorant of what we are discussing. You've been alive almost 200 years, Frenchie says to me as I nod my head. Mon Dieu, my God, Frenchie says while taking a deep draw on his cigarette. So what you told me about your parents, was that true? Frenchie says to me and I nod my head. Yeah, all of that was true. Plus I was in the American Civil War, the Union side, and both world wars. My life has been mostly fighting and killing, with a few years in between the fighting and killing, I say to him as I sigh and add more lighter fluid to the fire. I see. Well, I'm glad you finally told me. I can understand why you would keep it a secret. Both and Butcher especially hate soups. I'm not sure they will take kindly to knowing you are one of them, Frenchie says to me as I nod my head. They should know too though. When they get here I will explain to them what happened and who I really am, I say as Frenchie nods his head. Then for the next several hours, Frenchie asks me all sorts of questions about my past, which I answer. We then bond over some of my past as the fire slowly dies down with only the bones of Black Noir left. Once the fire is only embers, with the help of Frenchie and Kimiko we dig a very deep hole where I dump his bones. Then I quickly hunt down a deer before tossing the body a few feet above Black Noir's bones. This will confuse the scent of most tracking animals and soups. If they dig this up for whatever reason they should stop after finding the dead deer. By the time we finished this, Butcher, and Huey finally arrived. Well, ain't this a fancy place? Did Grace give us the fancy safe house? Butcher says as they walk inside to see Frenchie with his guns like normal, while I'm talking with Kimiko, who is drawing her questions to me in Japanese. Oi, what the hell is crazy bitch doing out of her chains? Butcher says as Kimiko stands up and gives him a very angry look. And Butcher instinctually grab their guns at her threatening poster. Jesus, calm down. She is now a part of the team, like it or not, I say as nods his head, putting his gun away. Butcher glares at her while slowly putting his gun away, with Kimiko staring back at him. Ain't no way I'm working with a soup, Butcher says while glaring at her. You are, and you've been working with one since the beginning, I say, turning to him as and Huey look confused. What? Fuck that. Plus the bastards we used, I wouldn't say we worked with them, Butcher says, confusing my statement. Not them, I'm a soup, I say and bring out my claws while still smoking my cigar with my other hand. The three stare at me with wide eyes processing the information. Fuck. Butcher says drawing his gun on me as I stare at him with a blank look. Butcher, calm down. He is not like the others, he has been helping us the whole time and I'm sure Grace knew about him too, says while looking to me for confirmation and I nod my head. This is bullshit. You've been one of them the whole time and didn't say anything. Butcher says while still holding onto his gun with anger all over his face. I didn't say anything because of this very reason. Do you see your reaction to the information? If you knew from the beginning, do you think you would be a part of the task force? I say to him as she glares at me before letting out a heavy sigh. Fuck me, Butcher says while sitting down and putting his gun away. Now shut up and listen, then you can ask all the questions you want, I say and explain to them what I told Frenchie. They ask a lot of questions, well at least and Huey ask me a lot of questions. While Butcher just sits there in silence not saying anything staring off while lost in thought. Was mostly interested in the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement, while Huey was curious about both World Wars and the moon landing. Anything you want to ask me, Butcher, I say as the others seem to have asked all the questions they had. Yeah, just one. Do you think you can kill Homelander? Butcher says to me with a curious and hopeful look. I stare at him for a bit while thinking about what I know of Homelander. Possibly. Though it would be very circumstantial. Meaning, I do believe I can cut him with my claws, how deeply would remain to be seen. Even if let's say I can decapitate him, I'm not as fast or strong as him, so it would take a surprise attack or help of others to distract him or hold him down long enough for me to kill him, I say giving my thoughts on the matter as Butcher nods his head thinking. Then we just need a few more stronger soups and we can get him, Butcher says with a smirk. It's not that simple, Butcher, and you know that, I say to him as she grumbles. We need a better plan than to just walk in there and fight him, says agreeing with me. Plus, if I kill him without exposing who is to the world, they will make him a martyr and me a criminal. I doubt even my connections could save me at that point and I'd rather not be on the run for the foreseeable future, I say to him as Butcher stands up annoyed but can understand our points. Fine, so we just keep to the plan? Expose Vought for the fuckers they are and then the soups, after we can go after him. Butcher says as we all nod our heads. Fuck. Fine, then what's next? They will be trying even harder now to find us after we killed 2 of their people, Butcher says while giving us all hard looks. I'm not sure, we need to think, I say rubbing my eyes tiredly since we are now in a very shitty situation. Chapter 31, ch 31. Moving forward, we need another soup in the 7. Huey keep working on Starlight joining us. Butcher, you two learn more about the Samaritan embrace since Vought bankrolls it. Frenchie, you keep Kimiko company and make sure she doesn't get into any trouble. I will contact Rainer to see if we can get some help in this cleanup, I say and then rub my eyes from the stress of our situation. Everyone nods their heads and moves to go complete the tasks I gave them. I walk outside and pull out my ghost phone before calling Rainer. After a few rings, she picks up. Logan, didn't think I'd be hearing from you for a while, especially after Grace informed me of your leadership abilities, Rainer says after answering the phone. Normally that would be the case. However, we have a situation. As I'm sure you are aware, Translucent has been gone for a couple of months now, and just last night Black Noir will be considered missing, I say to her as I hear her sigh on the other end. It won't be long before Vought and Homelander find out about us. We need some help with the cleanup, I say to her as she goes quiet. Listen, the higher UPS are pissed about what is happening since there is no solid evidence against Vought. So for now I can't help clean anything up, not until you get real evidence against them. Worst case you are untouchable since you work outside the common laws, while the rest of your team will be burned, Rainer says to me as I grunt in annoyance. We are working on getting that evidence. However, until then I need you to pull some strings and get my team's family and friends under protection. They can't work if they think their families are at risk, I say to her hearing her let out another sigh. Fine, get me the names of the people needing protection and I will grab them, Rainer says to me. Will do, I say back before we hang up. I then text her the names and addresses of MM's wife and daughter, along with Huey's dad, and Frenchie's lover. Then I text the team to inform their loved ones that a CIA team is coming to pick them up for protection. They were very grateful for me informing them. Logan, meet and me at St. Mary's Hospital. We have a lead on the V. Butcher texts me a few seconds after I texted the group about the CIA protection. I then grab the van, since the others took Butcher's car. Arriving there I say the 2 others and we walk inside. Butcher leads us to the section he believes has the compound V. Entering it, we see several infants being held in hospital cribs while N4 is next to them putting the compound V into their system. Well, shit. That explains a lot, I say looking around as the 2 others nod their heads. Butcher looks very excited as his mind swarms with thoughts. Grab some V, then we need to leave, I say as nods his head walking over to one of the cribs and taking some of the compound V lying nearby. Hey, who are you? We all hear and see several security guards enter the place. Fuck you, Butcher says pulling his gun out and shooting at them killing one, while the other instantly reacts shooting back. Dives behind a pillar while holding the baby who he was just looking at. The baby is laughing while gunshots are being exchanged. I let out a very annoyed sigh while glaring at Butcher, before rushing the guards who shoot me. However, the 9mm round barely pierced my skin now falling flat to the ground. Then I punched the closest one in the throat, crushing his windpipe and making him suffocate to death. I grabbed the next one's head and with a quick jerk snap his neck like a twig, and for the last one who now tried to run, I sweep his leg out and stomp his neck from behind, snapping it in half too. We need to leave now, I say, turning to them as Butcher gives me a crazy grin while places the baby back down. Grabs a full vial of Compound V before we quickly leave. We then rush back to my house, where I call Rainer on the way, who told me her people picked up the people I texted her. I then inform her I have the Compound V and to meet us at the house. When we get home, we see Huey, Frenchie, and Kimiko watching the news. We have shit, this keeps getting better and better, Butcher says, laughing and seeing the news which shows Starlight coming out and telling everyone how the Deep sexually assaulted her on her first day. Don't look at me like that, mate, I meant that another 7 has fallen. Shit, there is what now, 4 left, Butcher says as Huey gives him an angry look, thinking he finds Starlight's sexual assault funny. Logan, Kimiko has drawn some things while you were gone. She wants you to look at them, Frenchie says, since I'm the only one who can communicate with her. Since she only signs with a special sign language, but also writes in Japanese. What is it? I ask as Kimiko leaves to grab it. Frenchie shrugs, not knowing what it is. The picture shows a sun with 2 snakes running up the sides, while hissing, looking right and left. I stare at the symbol for a while, racking my brain for what it means, then my eyes widen as I stare at her. Are you Shining Light Liberation Army? I ask her in Japanese so the others don't freak out if that is the case. Kimiko then waves her hand back and forth, meaning kinda. From what I know, the Shining Light Liberation Army, SLLA, is a far-left terrorist organization based in the Philippines, which even has ties over here in the USA, which explains how she was moved over here. Explain, I say in Japanese still as the others are looking at us confused about what is happening. Kimiko then grabs some more paper and begins writing down her past. She writes that growing up on the coast of Japan with a mother, father, and brother, she remembers looking at palm trees in the moonlight from her home country, and then a group of terrorists from the Shining Light Liberation Army broke into her home and beat down and killed her parents. The soldiers nabbed her and her brother, forcing them to serve in their army in the war-torn Philippines for many years. The last time she saw her brother was when he was ravenously eating through his small rations of food at their camp in a jungle. She quietly sneaks over to him and gives him the rest of her food. He refused and insisted that she eat. Kimiko affectionately pats him on the head and leaves. She eventually tried and managed to escape, but was recaptured, however, taken prisoner by the terrorist group, and smuggled into the United States, where she was experimented on with Compound V provided by A-Train. I see. Well shit, I'm sorry you had to go through that, I say to her in English this time, before explaining what she told me to the others. and Huey give her an empathetic look hearing what she went through, while Butcher remains indifferent to the news. Frenchie, however, gave her a very empathetic look before familiarly hugging her. During the short time we knew her, Frenchie and her have grown very close. Then again, Frenchie loves misfits much like himself, which would explain why he is the closest one to me in the group as well. I'm here for you, though I'm sure we can get you back home if you want, Frenchie says to her while giving me a hopeful look. Sure, I can pull some strings, if that is what you want, I say, turning to Kimiko, who gives Frenchie and me a long look, shaking her head. However, Kimiko holds Frenchie's hand, admitting that she wants to stay with him. When is Rainer coming? Butcher says. Tomorrow night, I say to them. So, can I leave then? Huey asks me and I nod my head. Sure, just be careful, I say, nodding my head. Yeah, don't let the fake feelings change you, Butcher says as Huey shoots him a hard look. I'm gonna make sure he is alright, Butcher says, leaving a few minutes after Huey to chase after him. I'm gonna call my family, says, walking to another room. I then head outside to have a cigar in peace, while Frenchie and Kimiko try to communicate. Frenchie is doing his best to learn the language Kimiko uses to sign with. Later, Butcher comes back looking very annoyed. I just ignore him. Huey doesn't come back, which makes me assume he and Starlight are now sleeping together. The following night, Rainer arrives alone and hands her the Compound V, explaining to her what we know. Afterward, Rainer leaves, promising to use this to help keep our task force going and to ensure no one, outside me, can be prosecuted for acquiring this item. Like that, the next few weeks go by with no issue. However, Huey appears to be heading out every few days to meet with Starlight. He doesn't come back at night, leaving us all to assume they are sleeping together, which was confirmed by Butcher confronting him. Why do you even care? Huey asks before heading back out again. Because Homelander raped my wife, Butcher says with deep hatred lacing his voice, making everyone turn to look at him. We knew this already, but Huey had no idea. What? Huey says in surprise. Back in 2011, my wife, Rebecca, and I were invited to a Christmas party at Vought Tower, since she was the senior director of digital marketing at Vought. At the party, I met Homelander for the first time and I felt something was off. Like he was interested in my wife more than he let on, Butcher says while having a hard look remembering the past. A few days after the party, Becca met with Homelander in her office where he raped her. Then she went to the park and sat on a bench. For hours she sat there. Then she got up and was never seen again, Butcher says to him as he looked like he wanted to punch something. That's why you can't trust any soup, Butcher says. Yet, our boss is a soup and we have another in our team now too, Huey says, making Butcher glare at him. There aren't soups. Logan is just a freak of nature and well, she is too, Butcher says, gesturing to Kimiko, who flips him off. Butcher looks ready to die on his hill of all soups are bastards. Whatever, Starlight is different too. Huey says leaving before Butcher can continue to berate him. Fucking wanker. Butcher says after Huey leaves. Butcher, what are you doing? Says as we see Butcher walk back with a Barrett 50 calories 12.7mm sniper rifle. Something's off and I intend to stop it. Butcher says as we all give him a confused look. Butcher, I start to say, Logan, I will shoot you too. Butcher says glaring at me. Fine, but if you get caught you are on your own, I say stepping away since he wants to be an idiot it seems. We'll see, Butcher says before quickly leaving after Huey.